Is this right?
Good afternoon. This is Sunday. What is today? September 19th, I believe.
September 19th, yes.
Yeah, I'm Avram Friedman, and I'm here today with Dr. Dana Patterson, who is the president of the Jackson County, North Carolina branch of the NAACP, and Marsha Lee Baker, Dr. Marsha Lee Baker, who is the chair of the Community Coordination Committee, and I am the chair of the Political Action Committee of that branch of the NAACP. And we're here today to talk about the coming of the Harriet Tubman sculpture that's been touring the country. And we'd like to talk a little bit about that, about the history of Harriet Tubman and what she has meant for the history of this country and for the history of the African American population. And Marsha Lee Baker, you have been in charge of the event that is coming to Sylva as this sculpture is arriving, and we'll be having a ceremony. And please tell us a little bit about that sculpture and about how you have organized it and what just tell us about the history of the sculpture a little bit.
Okay. Do you want that, and then we'll get to the big stuff, which is Harriet Tubman's history.
Yes.
Right, yes. Well, really, when I think back on where we began, which was about this time last year, when we first heard about the availability of the Harriet Tubman sculpture, its availability it had opportunity to have its next installation schedule, and we heard about it. And really, as I look back on that memory at Bridge Park a year ago, I think all we ultimately heard was Harriet Tubman. And it still puts chills on me. I remember a few of us were standing there, and it was like, well, would you think the branch would be interested in installing it? And I think some of us just went, well, it's Harriet Tubman. And then we were off. And we really, now looking back, we didn't know how involved it would get, what it would require, etc. And we have never been short of good ideas. And some bad ideas, but we recognize not to do those, but some good suggestions for what to do.
You want to talk about those at all?
Not so much. No, but that's another good thing about collaborative work, and this has definitely been collaborative. We've had, within the Community Coordination Committee, we set up a Harriet Tubman Sculpture Planning Committee, and then we broke out into different teams to do things, and then we would go to the Executive Committee, which of course is led by Dana, and you're on as a committee chair. And then we would go to the branch membership and had a monthly meeting. And so it was I'm always glad once we work through a decision to have it be collaborative, to have input, ideas. I'd be frightened to try to plan something, a tenth this big on my own. So it's really helpful that way. You get so many different perspectives, so many different knowledge bases. So the big kickoff. Well, first of all, the sculpture, as you know, arrives. The sculpture is coming from the Northeast, and it will be here sometime tomorrow morning, and it will actually be installed in downtown Sylva at Bridge Park on a concrete slab that has a pavilion stage behind it, and then Harriet Tubman and the young enslaved girl who she is bringing along to freedom with great risk will be there until December 21st. We have a 3-month installment.
And the sculptor is from Jackson County, right?
That was another. Wow. Okay. That was sort of like I felt. Yeah. Yes, and I don't remember if we were told that in the first initial information. Maybe so, but we were just like, "Oh, that's neat."
Yeah.
Harriet Tubman,
Yeah. Very fascinating.
It was so. So some of us have met Wesley Walford in person, or either we know very much more about him. He's a very well-known sculptor, and so this is all news to me. It's great, I think, that he and his wife and his studio are here in the what do we call that? The southern part of Jackson County. I can't understand geography. I don't know why we're north and he's south, but that's what they tell me.
Cashiers area.
Yeah, the Cashiers area, exactly. And so he and his wife will be at I think his wife is coming to be one of the many people to observe the installation tomorrow, and then they will be, of course, at the dedication ceremony. They're very, my impression is from my few conversations, they're very calm, laid back, fun, friendly people who, and when I was, Odyssey attended our planning committee meeting on Friday, and she said, you know, let me be clear here. Wesley and I just want to be in the background. We don't want to. We're just like, you know, because we started talking about seating and all this stuff. She said, that's not what we're about. We just want people to come see the sculpture. So yeah.
So Dr. Patterson, tell us, who was Harriet Tubman?
Oh wow, Harriet Tubman has been for so many different things. I think she represented for enslaved people of her time hope for a better life. Her determinism and her courage, I think even now beckons to even our generation, in our time, people in our time, a symbol of commitment, of this fierce tenacity and this willingness to face all odds, and to say that against all odds, I am still willing to go. And I'm still willing to use whatever resources I have, even if it's just my own 2 feet, to get me there. And she is just this great woman of courage. She was a young girl when she even started this work, and when she started having dreams of freedom. She had already endured so much, living in Maryland and living on a plantation where she was abused, where she was mistreated, where she had been sold into slavery, and watched members of her families be traded and be torn away from her. She never had an opportunity to sort of live some of the privilege with some of the privileges and the luxuries of life that we have now. And sometimes I think about that as, you know, so for me personally, it's an inspiration, because I think, how can I even be bothered about any inconvenience that I have when I think about someone like Harriet Tubman, that even in the face of everything she endured, she still said, there's more. I can do more.
And so, like, she escaped from slavery.
Yes.
And she developed roots which later, and which she helped to develop into the Underground Railway to help other slaves. And she returned at great risk to herself over and over again, 13 or 14 times, I think. She went back to the South. She escaped to Pennsylvania and then went back to the South, and helped others find their way to freedom as well.
That's the fascinating part to me. To be an individual that to escape is one thing, and to be free of it and to say, whew, I made it. But to risk going back, because you know that you're not truly free until everyone is free. And so for me, that's a resounding message right now, to imagine that even as comfortable as I may be in my life, as educated as I may be, as free from certain obstacles, I am not free until everyone is free. And to me, that's just so powerful. The message that resounds when I think about the legacy that she left for me and other black women, other black people, and other people who want to fight and work for freedom. That she wasn't content to leave anybody left behind. Anybody that would go, she was willing to take them.
Do you know anything about the history of the Underground Railroad? And did it exist before Harriet Tubman? And what was the extent of it? I mean, was there basically just one route of the Underground Railroad? I know it wasn't really a railroad. But was there anything similar to that in the western part of the state, in North Carolina? Was there an underground railroad that came through Sylva? Or
Well, there were stops along in our neck of the region. That's what I guess we could say it. There were stops in western North Carolina along places in the Underground Railroad, and it was really a group of a way of sort of delineating a path to freedom and a path to the north. And so it was a way to determine safe houses and individuals who had committed to use their own privilege and their own place in society. And these were mostly white people who said, my house is going to be a safe place. And that if the slaves can identify me as a person who's willing to be a stop along this path to their freedom, because there had to be a path, there had to be some stops. People had to eat, people had to rest, people had to they had to change clothes maybe, or they had to maybe escape the path of dogs were on their trail, and individuals who had all kinds of ways of hunting, and so a lot of these folks that were a part of the Underground Railroad, they sacrificed they put their own lives and their own families at risk for something that they thought was so important and so meaningful.
And I'm sure many of them paid the price for it as well.
Oh yeah.
Along the way, because
I know they did.
as many of those who escaped, there were probably just as many who didn't succeed in escaping. It's a history which really hasn't been told. It's something we never learned in public school, and I never remember learning it. It may have been mentioned that there was an underground railroad, but it was never elaborated on, what that meant and how many people were involved, what the routes were, and what the penalty was if you got caught. And,
It also wasn't mentioned, and of course, it's obvious. You would expect to hear this probably of a white woman my age in the United States. I didn't know anything. I mean, I think maybe slavery was barely mentioned. I was probably a young grown woman before I had heard the name Harriet Tubman, and now I've read a pretty detailed biography of her, and it's like, how in the world could this not be told? How could this? But we know why, and now we're part of the bigger picture of changing that.
Well, and this is part of a terrible problem right now is the lack of education in public schools about the true history of our country and how it relates to not only slavery but taking away lands from Native Americans and the oppression that took place on many levels in the formation of this country. And even the distortion of what happened during the Civil War. I was raised in New York City, and we were taught when I was in elementary school that the Civil War really wasn't about slavery. And really, and I did not learn until I was a political science major in college. I did not learn until I reached college that the Civil War was about slavery. That's all the Civil War was about. And it's very simple to substantiate that by looking at the documents of secession that were issued by the various states. It was nothing but white supremacy and the right of the white man to own slaves. I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah. And when I think about that too, I think about, that was their way of life. That was what they knew. That was what their parents had taught, and that was what they believed would secure their way of living. And so not even thinking outside of the box, not even thinking that, these are individuals who have a right to life and liberty, and that they don't, the same way they were born into that system, Black people of that time were born into a system where they didn't even conceive the idea of not being slaves. And so part of what Harriet Tubman had to do after she recognized for herself that this was not okay, this life was, she wanted more than that. She had to convince others of that. And I can imagine that sometimes, even in this day and age, when we think about there's still movements that are worth fighting for and that are worth getting involved in and that are worth risking everything for. But the thing about it is sometimes you have to convince other people along the way that this is a worthy fight and this is a worthy cause.
Well, the truth has to come out. You know,
It does.
I mean,
It has to.
if we're going to heal, if we're going to come together in any meaningful way, we have to acknowledge everything that has happened in the past, all of the injustices, and the fight to correct those injustices, and that's something that's being fought right now on the federal and state level in public schools. North Carolina, the Republican-led state legislature just passed a law which would prohibit the teaching of critical race theory, and Governor Cooper has vetoed that legislation. It remains to be seen who's going to win that battle, because the governor's veto would have to be sustained by a certain number of Democrats, and we're not sure we have that.
I want to say also,
Yeah.
I'll butt in, okay? Well, no,
No.
it is so. I wonder. I don't know. I wonder what it must feel like, or what goes on in a mind and a lived experience like yours, Dana, to hear white people say, "Oh, well, it was so," or I mean, that we're preaching the truth, and sometimes I think you probably want to go, "No joke," yeah, right, gotcha, But it's like I don't want to ever seem offensive or self-righteous. When I would say I'm getting a clue, I think it's too about Avram. It's about humanity. That you just, I never thought it would be such a difficult conversation or way of life to say, y'all, we're all people, freedom and justice for all, and that would be so hard for some people to see.
Well, it is, but you have to confront the past in order to do that. And there's just this unwillingness among some people to do that because it hurts. It's hard to acknowledge that your ancestors were so cruel, or whatever. But it's necessary to do that. It's so necessary, and there's so many other. I just recently learned from our previous president, and now Secretary Enrique Gomez, I believe, it was him that I learned it from, the Mexican War that took place in this country. It was about slavery. Did you know that?
I did not know
I
that.
had not heard it.
Well, what happened was that Texas had many cotton farmers, and Mexico outlawed slavery. And that caused the Texas cotton farmers to secede from Mexico. That's what that was all about. That's why Texas became an independent state and later became, and that led to the Mexican War.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting that, sometimes that people will fight so hard to hold on to something that's not a truth. And it's hard. You were talking about how hard it is to kind of imagine that people that loved us, your parents and people that were responsible for shaping your mind and your teachers, that they would lie to you and that they would tell you something that's not true. And like, why would they do that?
Yeah,
and so
and they surely knew,
From what I gather, what happened was after the Civil War, there was a period when the North attempted to create a period of reconciliation with the South. And so they didn't want to offend people in the South by teaching the horrors of slavery and the Civil War. They wanted to bring the South back on board, and so that's the reason in the public schools it was taught that the Civil War wasn't about slavery, it was about economics or whatever.
States' rights is what we heard, and I was raised
States'
by
rights, right.
I was raised by Southern parents, and my heritage is in South Carolina, although I moved around a lot.
Right.
But it was all states' rights.
Which just became a code word for
what?
For
slavery,
continuing segregation, preventing black people from voting, and just so many other injustices related to racism in this country. But that was a bad a bad way of bringing the country back together again. After you go to the trouble of fighting a civil war over the issue of slavery, at least let's put an end to it and tell the truth about it.
Tell the truth. And tell the stories. And I love, anytime I hear people talk about, let's hear, what's the story here? And I think that's so important to the work we're doing. That we hear Harriet Tubman's story. We learn, and I want to learn more from your story,
Because we know that where those stories were, that there are many more that haven't been told, and they've been suppressed. They've been silenced on purpose because it benefited someone else, and it allowed their stories to ring louder and for their voices to be heard above the voices. And so that some voices got privileged, and that is the tragedy of the imbalance. And so, when we think about what's happening with them, and I've talked about this a little bit, but, the imbalance has happened around the Confederate statues and folks feeling like, well, this is our history, this is our story. And if indeed that is true, then what about the rest of the story? We're not telling the whole story. There were other people that fought and that lived and that loved and that took care of this land and this country and that helped to build these communities that we hold so dear. And do we just forget about those lives because somehow, we don't see them as being significant or we don't see them as being important? There were black, they were indigenous, there were people of color all along these lands. From the same time that white people got here, people of color were already here. As a matter of fact, the Cherokee were already here, and they were already living and taking care of this land. And then for us to come and think that somehow, and I say us, but I think about Westerners. But when I think about even the idea that just white people would come and not be willing to acknowledge that we didn't do this by ourselves. We had some help, and it was a lot of help. But as far as the education system, I wanted to go back to something you said about, how the education is. And I think when my children were young, one of the things that I remember being really fortunate about was that they sought the truth. They would seek that out. My father and my grandfather and my family members, and some of them are ancestors now, they would tell me the stories about my history. And so it became a part of regular conversation. And it became a part of the way I came to know myself. And I came to develop pride, even in a time when that wasn't being taught, that wasn't instilled. And so naturally, instinctively, however you want to say it, we brought that to our children and we delivered that to them. And I remember very fluently my daughter, Kayla, my oldest daughter, and her making a project for her school. And she was at elementary school, and she wanted to make a quilt that showed the Underground Railroad. And some of the houses would actually hang a quilt with certain patterns in that quilt that would determine. That was a marker. That was a way to determine. But the fact that she was so young and that she was searching for this story. She was pulling for the threads of herself. And I think it was a history project that she had to do that had nothing to do with that part of history, but she sought that story out. And she pulled on that one thread and she said, there's a piece of me in there. And she opened that whole thing up, and I know she got an A on that project. It was phenomenal, but it was an art project that she did. And I just remember her just saying those quilts told a story. And like even now, we're not done telling that story because there are still some young people that don't see themselves in the history, and they don't see themselves in the legacy of this beautiful, beautiful land and this beautiful part of the country. And that's a tragedy to me, that there are still young people that just don't see that this is their legacy too. They inherited this the same way that many other people that feel privileged and entitled to that legacy. So I don't know, how do we champion that for everybody? How do we let everyone get a sense of pride when it comes down to loving this land and this country.
We'll
And
make a
it's
video about this conversation.
That's the best right there. Yeah.
that's true. That's true.
That's part of it. But no, it's so much more. I think just more people in general need to get involved. People of all color. I think that a lot of people just are not aware of the history of this country, and a lot of people are not aware of even what is happening today. A lot of people are not aware of how what it means to live in a democratically run country. What, in other words, how to gain access to your legislators. What legislators do. Basic civics, I think, need to be taught more in the public schools so that people can participate. Because it's not democracy unless people participate and are able to participate. But mostly it's up to the individual to get involved and learn about what you can do as an individual. And I personally believe that once you do that and you empower yourself in that way, people have a lot of power in this country. And we really can affect change. I've seen it happening in my lifetime on environmental issues and somewhat on social justice issues. There's so much more that has to happen, but it really needs the young people have to get involved.
I was going to just say the modern day slavery, though, the social, the what is it, the justice system as we call it, and the prison industrial complex has stripped away for so many their ability to access those rights that we've talked about. And a lot of us don't understand how steeped that modern day history of our justice system, how that is so steeped in a history of racism and white supremacy and hatred and slavery, and because we passed these laws that people could not be enslaved unless they commit a crime.
Unless they're arrested for loitering.
Exactly. And so then we just decided to put these crimes then in the way of the people, because where were they to go when they were released from servitude with nothing and not given the things they were even promised by the country? And I guess this country's had a history of breaking its promises to
That's
people.
true. And I mean, it's one thing to pass a law, and it's another to change a culture. And the culture is the much more difficult thing to change. I mean, we can make all kinds of rules and regulations about police not, being physically abusive or abusing their power, but if the culture of the entire police department is to ignore that, then it will be ignored, and that's what's happening all over the country, not just police departments.
And if individuals, families, communities, people don't also understand something of one another's cultures, histories, and then the larger picture of culture and history in this country, then they don't know who to blame, who to ask for change, and you see that all sort of mixed up now, that a lot of misplaced blame and division, I think, that we're now, and I'm thinking of this, Avram, because you're bringing up police violence. In the last couple of years, I'm so concerned that our country is more divided by color and culture and economy, and it's just, and that's another huge, all those divisions, all those binaries, are so unhelpful for us.
I think it's part of a process that we're going through now, because we're seeing the police violence now, because everybody's got cell phones and video cameras. It's always been there, but now it's being brought to light, and that had to happen in order to address it. Because if people don't know it's happening, then there's nothing that anybody is going to do to change
Well, all
it.
right, let me go back to story.
Yeah.
If we don't listen to each other's story, then I know people who are never going to know anything more than, well, why did that black guy do that? Well, why did they did? Okay, you know, I hear a lot of that really negative thinking, feedback, perceptions, criticism from white people about any person of color, especially black people, and it's something that my husband and I try to figure out. How can we help educate those white people without further angering them and alienating them? How can we bring them along and up to speed? You know, is that making any sense? What I'm saying?
I personally feel it just has to be confronted, you know, and it's difficult. It is, yeah. People are going to get angry.
Yes.
But if we don't go through that process, things will never change. They have to. People on the other side need to understand. Hey, we're real people too, and we get angry too. And you have to accommodate us too. It can't always be us accommodating you.
Sure.
You know, and until we go through that process, there will be struggle. You know, that's what struggle is all about. Struggle is not called struggle because it's easy. It's a struggle. You know, yes, you have to confront those and not be worried about, you know, other people getting angry sometimes.
No, what I'm worried about. Okay, this come from me, where how I was when I got here. It's about violence and nonviolence.
Well, that's
See, and
an important distinction.
The more people I can talk to, whose story I can listen to, without either of us committing violence, inciting violence, whether it's verbal or physical, that's where my concern is. So I'm real good at shooting off at the mouth, you know. But I've had to learn over time.
Well, yeah.
Well, you know, I don't. Oh, okay.
Well, I think there's a quote that talks about, you know, in the end, that we're only going to preserve that which we love, and we're only going to love that which we understand, and we're only going to understand that which we know, those things that we know. And so, to bring it back to the Harriet Tubman sculpture. This is bringing a little piece of a story that so many don't know about. And so if we can impart in somebody's heart an opportunity to know and love the story of Harriet Tubman, then they too will be willing to fight to preserve that voice in history. And if I know your story, Avram, if I know your story, Marsha Lee, and if we can hear each other's voices and we can learn to love each other's stories and find the humanity in all of us, then I'm going to fight for you because I know your story and I understand who you are. And so when there comes an obstacle or a battle that's yours, and it may have nothing to do with me, I'm fine over here, but I'm going to be willing to stand up for you because maybe I have the advantage in that moment, and maybe I have a platform, and maybe I have something that can be used to help people to understand the humanity of you. And I can show that because not just do you know your story now, but now I know your story too. So telling the story of Harriet Tubman and the people that she emancipated, helped to emancipate with her courage and with her bravery and her strength, you know, that's going to allow maybe some young white person or a young black person to fall in love with her story. And this is a beautiful work of art that we have to, you know, and art has that power to bring us all together. Art can do that for us, you know, music and art. I think those are, and music is art, but it has the power to bring us together and put us on one accord. So we can all look at this beautiful work of art and we can say, wow, that's certainly a story to be admired. And then we fall in love with that story and with that voice, and then we fight for it. We're willing to fight for it.
And Harriet Tubman, I mean, is such a powerful figure. In fact, was supposed to be on the $20 bill, which Trump stopped that from happening. But I don't know what has President Biden done anything to reverse Trump's decision on that?
I don't know, but I thought that there had been messing with that decision to go forward with the bill. There'd been some messing with it, and it's still not a done decision yet. There's still possibility. But I thought it was done. I thought it was going to happen, but I do know, and this is trivial compared to that concern, but there will be a Harriet Tubman $20 bill at the dedication ceremony.
Yes.
Now, it wasn't,
not
not
tender.
from the Federal Reserve or anything, but we had this little graphic designer who kind of put that together.
Maybe we could use
So,
that for some
amazing.
alternative economy or something.
So, we started to put on the back of the bill some information about the bill for that to become currency, literal currency.
That would be great.
Yeah. So it's the design has changed, but we'll still have a brief history. That gives me something else to put in the program.
Yeah.
Or say. Yeah.
Well, it just goes to show you can write laws and you can change these political acts, but you can't legislate hearts and minds.
Amen.
And you can't make with all the laws that have been written to help people gain their freedom and to help emancipate people, none of those laws have still managed to turn the tide of people's hearts.
Yes.
And so that's the part that stories and that love is going to have to do. And that's the part that people seeing us working together, seeing us arm in arm, that you fought for this, Marsha Lee, just as hard as I was fighting for this. And, Avram, you were a part of this when Reverend Charles Lee, the first president of the NAACP in Jackson County, you joined him in that fight, before I even came on the scene. And the fact that people see that, and that's an inspiration to others to say, now, wait a minute. If they can get along long enough to make this happen and to make this a reality, then wow, this is truly something.
It was easy to work with Charles Lee. Yeah.
Avram, that's why you and I can work together, get along, because you think of the names of the committees we help lead. You're political action committee chair. I'm community coordination chair. That says a lot from your perspective and mine. And Dana, you are the leader who helps us see our common mission, our common ground. And it's a both and. We need both.
But another thing that I think is worth mentioning was one of the reasons that not only the Jackson County branch got started, but 6 other branches in the western part of the state got started at the same time because of the leadership of Rev William Barber and his very intentional effort to bring in new people into the NAACP, white people, Hispanic people, Asian people, Native American people, formerly. The NAACP, of course, has a very long history of different races coming together. I mean, it was started by a combination of black and white people, Jewish
different
people,
genders, different faiths, traditions.
and others. But in many ways, from my perception, was that the NAACP had kind of drifted off a little bit for a while and become more very conservative politically, but also more isolated, and mostly older people who had different ideas about working together with other people. And Reverend Barber reversed that. And he, very, very intentionally, brought people together by pointing out that white people, even rural, very conservative white people, have many of the same problems as poor black people do.
Absolutely.
Many of the people who are being cut off from Medicaid in North Carolina are white people. They're not black people. Thousands in Jackson County alone are white people. So I think we have to recognize injustice that affects all of us and stop allowing racial differences, or people who intentionally try to divide us.
Yeah, just a ploy. Yeah.
So that we won't work together, We have to overcome that and point out the commonalities we have, the common injustices we're all facing in life, and use that as a reason to work together and get to know each other better.
Oh yeah. Yeah, until we see that mutuality of all of our plights, and we understand that, we have to journey forward, together. That has to be a movement that we all make together in one thought. But I'm really, really proud to just be doing our part, that we are doing a little part, and this is just a little piece, in the whole overall picture of what needs to change and what needs to be done. But here in Western North Carolina, we're willing to do it. And there are good people that have it in their heart, and they know that this is something that had to be done. It needs to be done, and we're going to do it.
And it's also worth mentioning, I think, that our little chapter of the NAACP in Jackson County is one of the most active organizations in the state and maybe the country. But we, I think we need to be proud of that in our little community here.
Absolutely,
too.
Yeah, and I think that we never diminish anyone else's light or anyone else's story. I mean, one of the things that we're going to start our whole program with on Sunday, when we unveil the sculpture, is with a land acknowledgement. And the fact that we are willing to acknowledge that again, that's a whole nother part of saying that all of us, all of our lives and all of our stories are mutual, and they have a common thread. And so we honor the land, and we honor the fact that Cherokee were here in this land before we came. And that's not, some people have tried to make that a partisan issue as well too, in terms of saying, why would the NAACP honor, the land and do a land acknowledgement at an event? And I've heard that. I've definitely heard that. But the idea that why wouldn't we? Who are we not to acknowledge the humanity
all depend on the
of
same
someone
earth
else?
to survive. Yeah.
But if we were to then take that elitist attitude and that separatist attitude of separating again and just saying, we don't have anything to do with that, or that honoring and paying homage to people, because again, many of our roots again are traced back to indigenous roots. The same way the two of you even sitting on this couch, you might not know it, but probably somewhere in your roots traces back to some, African, some indigenous roots, and there were people in our families who, we're all here because
we all come from the same place
because the other ones existed. And I love there's an African saying that says, I am because you are, and because you are, therefore I am and shall be. And to me, that is a constant reminder that I can't do anything until I recognize the humanity in you. I can't move forward. I can't do a single thing. So I love that we're all doing this work together, and I love that this is important to so many people. And I think that in this moment, when we stand together and say what an important moment this is for us to have an opportunity to tell Harriet Tubman's story in a place where it's been silenced for so long, and people that look like her, their stories have been silenced, I think that'll give the courage for other stories of the people who their ancestors and their descendants still live here. They were born and raised right here in Sylva and in Cullowhee and you wouldn't know because they're nice and quiet, and many of them have just sort of blended into sort of the backdrop of the way things go. But to acknowledge their stories and acknowledge who they are and who they were and who their people were, that's going to be powerful. That's going to be really powerful.
Forward together.
Forward together.
So just to wind up here, if you will, tell us the itinerary for, for the entire stay of the sculpture.
Okay.
Yeah.
ought to have it memorized by now. Well, tomorrow morning, this sculpture is scheduled to arrive in downtown Sylva. Somewhere between 8 and 10 is our best estimate right now. And there'll be a crew waiting right there to install.
Just to interrupt you for a second, tell us a little bit about where it's been.
Oh, I haven't gotten all that memorized. It's been
all over the country.
All over the country. It has been all over the country. I have been thinking mostly up the Northeast because of Maryland being Harriet Tubman's home eventually, and she first escaped to Canada with a lot of other African Americans, and I'm not sure it's gone to Canada, but I think it's gone as far as Texas and over a bit. Dadgum, I gotta get my homework done.
Well, that's fine.
No, I read it.
I'm sorry to surprise you with that question.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's like reading when you read for me, I read a bunch of places and.
But do you know approximately how many stops it's made around the country?
No, but you need more to do.
Yeah,
do you know?
But will this be its last stop?
No, it's going to more places beyond here. But I think it is pretty amazing that Mr. Wesley is
Wesley Walford.
Walford. Okay, I've said his name wrong all day. Then please forgive me. Charge that to my head, not to my heart. But Mr. Walford, and he's from this local area. He's from right up the hill, right up the mountain in Cashiers.
Right up down that mountain.
And so I think for him bringing this story and bringing this legacy and his work home to his home, back home.
Yeah.
That's significant.
I think it is too, and I have heard Wesley and his wife, partner, studio organizer Odyssey say they can hardly wait to have her back home.
Yeah,
they miss this sculpture. They are so glad that.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about a small sculpture that fits on your mantelpiece. This is like 5 tons.
Tons, and it is 9 feet. It's bronzed. And it's 9 feet tall and about 7 feet wide at the base. I've already envisioned that I will fall down on my knees and cry when I see it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. When people just see the photographs of it, or you go to our website or Wesley Walford's website, or you look at our poster, people just look at it and just are breathtaking. And Harriet Tubman is pulling this young child along who looks so afraid and so tentative, naturally, and it's very well thought out, what he put into it, and that I don't have memorized either. But the sculpture will be there, and some people think that the sculpture is going to be actually put in place on Sunday, September 26th, the dedication ceremony. That's not so. We needed to have a few days to make sure she got here on time.
It's coming tomorrow, right?
Think about the difference in weather and travel conditions. So we have a team member who's on the cell phone with the truck driver, as they've been talking for a couple of weeks now, I think, making the plan. So the sculpture will be installed, and we'll make sure that the outside area is sort of set up to focus on her. I hope that's not inconsiderate to call the sculpture her. I just think of it that way.
Oh, I think it's very much
it's
her.
her.
Yeah, I think it's all right.
All right, it's not like I need to be more. The Journey to Freedom, Harriet Tubman sculpture.
If the artist, if he refers to it as her, then I think that we're safe to do that. Do that same thing.
So, and then the sculpture will be there through the week, so people can start coming by, looking at it. It's a lovely location because Bridge Park is downtown Sylva. It's a big grassy area, wide open.
It'll be on the cement right in front of the stage on Bridge Park. Yeah.
And if you want to, I've gone to Bridge Park and say to meet friends for lunch or a snack or something, and just gone up on the stage area to sit if nothing else is going on there. And
people can touch it, though.
People can touch it.
Is there a plaque, an explanatory plaque?
Yes.
There's going to be a couple of plaques, from what I understand. One telling the story of Harriet Tubman, and a little bit of course, a synopsis. We couldn't tell her whole story in that moment, but a synopsis of her story. And the other, I think, is going to tell a little bit more about the dimensions and the story of the sculpture, the creation of the actual art. And
we, very well, we have a famous independent bookstore in downtown Sylva, City Lights Bookstore, who will, I've not confirmed, I've not talked with the owner in the last couple of weeks, but there will be books available about Harriet Tubman, etc. So I think people will have opportunities to keep learning more and more as they are so drawn
We're going to
to
get
it.
good news coverage too. I think we'll probably see WLOS come there.
hope so.
I saw on the front page of this week's Sylva Herald,
Mm-hmm.
big headline on the front page.
Our tourism well, we have many. The branch secured many partners. If we hadn't had the town of Sylva agree to be a partner, we wouldn't and allow us to put it on town property.
Yes.
We wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have the Chamber of Commerce. We wouldn't have Jackson County Tourism Development Authority and
Reconcile Sylva. Yes.
Jackson County Arts Council, Dogwood Health.
Oh my goodness.
Health Trust gave us the grant that made sure we wouldn't be knocking on doors at midnight to ask for $1.
But we would have though.
We would have. We knew it. We did. It was like, okay, well, if we don't get the grant, that's okay. We'll do it. And the Cowie Art and History, Cowie Art and Heritage Center, who agreed to be our 501(c)(3) agency. I know we're leaving some off, but
Well, so I misdirected you. You were telling us about the itinerary of what's going to be happening.
Well, but it shows the level of interest and curiosity that people have about this, and so it's good. It's good for me to remember other questions that people might have. So through the week, people can come, and then on Sunday, September 26th, from 2 to 4, actually, there's a little activity going on before and after that, is the actual dedication ceremony.
Okay.
And it is an overarching dedication of the 2021 theme for our branch, which is Journey to Freedom Together. But it's also literally the biggest person in the room at the Bridge Park will be Harriet Tubman, this sculptor. And so it is also a dedication for this. Wofford named this sculpture Journey to Freedom.
And so again, this is going to be September
26th,
the
Sunday, September 26th.
It's 2
to 4, and if you come early, because at 1:30 we'll have a half hour of music, and at the end we'll have a half hour of music, and this is music by Blue Jazz, a trio of musicians.
I love them.
Yes,
we're
already.
Met them.
Yes,
and bring an umbrella because it's rain or shine.
Bring an umbrella, rain or shine. And I loved this. Dr. Patterson said at our branch meeting yesterday, bring tissue. You will be moved. Bring tissue. You will be moved. We will have 200 chairs set up. It's going to be very. We're all very aware that we're still in a health crisis with the pandemic. We'll have chairs that can be moved and rearranged so you can sit by yourself, or you can sit over here with your mate, or however you want to do it. Bring umbrellas, and we won't have a big layout of refreshments because that's not a health conscious thing to know. We'll have water, and you'll be able to. Everybody wants you to go up to the sculpture, sit by the sculpture, touch the sculpture, take pictures. We hope that people will take what do you call them? Selfies of themselves, and post them and share with the world, share with the branch. Yeah. So that's so come from 1:30, plan to stay till 4:30 if you can, but it's 2 to 4 for the program. We have a keynote speaker, Dr. Vincent Willis. His title for his talk, he is from the University of Alabama New College, and when I read about the new college, I thought I wish I could go to undergraduate school all over again. That's exactly what I would have wanted to do. It included in the title is Monuments,
Beyond Monuments.
Harriet Tubman, Black Children, and the Journey to Freedom. Or if I had my program, which is right over there, I could tell you all this stuff. Really, I'm sorry, because I hate to butcher that. Dana will be performing. Doing a performance of a poem written about Harriet Tubman, combined with musical complement to it.
By Margaret Walker, the poem Harriet Tubman. It's entitled Harriet Tubman. It's by Margaret Walker.
Oh, we will. There will be a singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing, often known as the Black National Anthem, Welcome and Prayer, and mixed in, it's all coordinated with all of that. Your poem will be merged with Blue Jazz's instrumental work. But here is Dr. Vincent Willis's title, Beyond Monuments, which we have to get beyond. We have to have them, but we got to get beyond. Beyond Monuments, Harriet Tubman, Black children, and their relevance to a 21st century freedom movement. Yeah,
I love it. Taking
Chills.
us from the history all the way to the right now, to the present.
The historical, quite historical Liberty Baptist Church will have a group of choir members participating several times in the program, and that's the gist of the program.
Okay.
We hope you'll come early and stay late and
Please.
celebrate,
Yeah.
talk, start telling stories to each other.
Yeah. Let's just bask in the warmth of, each
Under
other's love, each other's lives, each other's lived experiences, and let's talk about their next steps. Let's start to get ready for what we have left to do.
Yes.
I said that this morning. This is not necessarily, certainly it's a time to celebrate, but it's not a time for us to be complacent. This is just the beginning. We have places to go and things to do and freedom to be won for others.
Yes.
You got it.
I love this.
Okay. Well, thank you both for coming this afternoon.
Thank you for inviting
And
us.
Thank you for the
so
idea.
looking forward to the program and to the arrival tomorrow of the sculpture. I'm going to go down and video record it if I can.
Good.
And
Yeah.
this will be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.